Let's welcome Susan. Before I give her the mic, I don't know how many of you have seen her book or have read her wonderful poetry. This is Susan's book of poems, Remember Where You Started From. The first half is very much, well, Susan can tell you about it.
Just about to get another book out, so that's a good feeling. I went to Oysterville. I grew up here in Oysterville and went to Oysterville School. And in the 5th grade, we had a very inventive teacher, and she was keeping all the boys busy. And we had a little jigsaw, and the girls too. And anyway, we made cutting boards for our mothers. Here's one of mine. It was a great time. And thank you all for coming, and I know some of you know me and know my story, and a lot of you don't. Can you hear well enough without the mic?
Yes.
Okay, and if I sink down, my sister, who's in voice, said she will clap her hands loudly.
I won't clap.
It's so good to feel among friends here, and I've enjoyed the other lectures so much too, and if you haven't,
He's having some difficulty.
Oh, sure, for me.
It's just whether you...
Do you want to just go down?
No, I'm fine.
There's a nice chair right there. My sister says if I speak with the, whatever it is, then it'll get there brightly, I think it's
In the
word.
mask.
Not in the back of my voice. Anyway, it's good to see you all, and I had so many, I think everybody who's been here in Oysterville a long time or gone to school, you have so many memories it was hard to choose. So guess what? You're in for childhood memories today. I am Susan Holway. I was born and raised here in Oysterville and went to school in this very place. My older siblings were born in Seattle, and my mother would go up to the city to have them. That's what you did then. And then, but I came a little early. I was supposed to come in January, and I wanted to get there for Christmas. I missed it. As you know, I'm often late. I was the 26th, not the 25th, but here I am. That was Doc Neese, who some of you know and remember. I think it took a friend who once lived here to remind me that the Oysterville I grew up in was above all a community. We not only said hello at the store and post office while passing on the street, we also did things together. In the summer, if the Heckes family, who lived in the big greenhouse down the road, and here's the lady knows that well, if they held a bonfire down at the bay, everyone came. No questions. You didn't need an invitation. Adults, teenagers, and kids, we all came. The town had dogs, kids, horses, old veterans, young families, bachelors, widows, grandmothers, aunts and uncles, but rarely an old maid. The brothers and sisters, like the Whitler brothers in Ocean Park of boat building fame, lived together, and nobody thought anything of it or talked about anything strange. It was just what you did. A sailor off a shipwreck near Ocean Park or Oysterville could stay here and not report back to duty. And they could marry and have children and descendants who are really respectable in the community now and help out a lot. So that was it was generous and helped the community to thrive. People used to drop by for coffee at our house. Neighbors like Bob Kemmer and Harry Espy would come over. They would just walk in the back door and sit down and ready for coffee. And then business, of course, with Dad. Nobody had to even knock. They just came in. Friends who moved to Oysterville from the city remembered this as something they'd never seen before. One told me, it felt like you were everybody's kids. The Golders, the Heckuses, the Kemmers, the Wrights, the Freshleys, the Andrews. It felt like everybody was looking out for you and after you. Whether it was a bonfire, a picnic, a celebration, a dinner, or a dance down at the hall on the corner by the stop sign down here, everybody came. On the 4th of July, we had a big picnic at the schoolhouse here. Usually it was nice and sunny enough to have it outside. It was great fun and a schoolyard full of people. At night, the fireworks went off toward Bay Center, and they were really pretty to watch. You could see them best from up at the point, you know, the park. Our dog Tippy, who we left upstairs for comfort, practically clawed the door down trying to get away from the giant booms, because then you could really set off fireworks. Later on, Bob Messing, Bob Messing, who lives going toward the beach, he was a big part of the Oysterville School and Community Club, and he had those big wrappers of dry ice for ice cream, so we could have vanilla, chocolate, or strawberry. That was great. And Chuck Messing, who still lives on Skating Lake Road, keeps the lawns mowed now for the community, which is pretty nice. The school here was also where we held the Oysterville Centennial. Leaders from as far away as South Bend came and spoke. You know, the South Bend Raiders. If you haven't seen a picture of Bud Golder and his wife, Joe, all dressed up, you missed a cute one. People from pioneer families like Lucille Wilson, related to the Clarks, and her mother Beulah Wickberg, and the Espies came out and spoke. And if the Golters weren't on the podium, by God, they should have been. Just ask Bud. My sister Kate and I had such fun dressing up in pioneer dresses with bonnets our mothers made for us. Well, hey there. Good to see you. Another thing we do is we go swimming in the bay in the warm tides of July and August. You know, the braver ones that go in May and September too. The brave boys would dare each other and plunge in swimming in front of what I call the Red House, or people call the Williams House down the street here, usually, or the Heckus House before it mudded in. Come on in, Sturgis, there'll be a chair someplace. There used to be a big pile of stones there that were rounded and were ballast from the ships that brought the lumber to Oysterville and took the oysters back to California. It was easy to simply put on our swimming suits, grab a towel, and either plunge into the high tide water or else wade in, getting wet a little bit at a time. You didn't need to take a shower ahead of time or pay a fee. You just jumped in the water, hopping with a yow! The bay water in summer was relatively warm, around, I don't know, what'd you say, Dick, 58, 60 degrees, something like that. But it felt cold at first. Sometimes others who were already in swimming would splash, and the timid kids still standing on the shore just jumped in, but usually we waded or dove right into the salty waters of the bay. Most of our mothers didn't go swimming, but sat on the shore, putting a towel down on the sand to sit on. But there was no staying dry. If kids didn't splash them when they were going into the water, somebody's dog would jump into the bay and then come out and shake all over and roll in the sand. An exception was Barbara Williams, an Espy relative, or an Espy, is that right, Cindy, an Espy?
Espy.
Yeah, who would come down each summer bringing her own 3 children. And other cousins came to visit, and Barbara took care of them all. She had a boat with an outdoor outdoor motor and taught us how to water ski if we could and encouraged us to swim. She was what you call a live wire. She always kept things going for us kids as long as she lived. Down at the bay, some kids took turns diving off the banks of grass and green pickle grass. They take a long run at it and splash into the water. When my folks first came to the peninsula in the 30s, my dad came looking around in 1929 and 30. He was a student of Professor Trevor Kincaid at the University of Washington. He came down to test out oyster growing, first by Mill Channel over by Nasale at the mouth of the river. He worked in a small lab there close to where Bob and Maysari Adair, good friends of mine, now live. There was a small lab there. It was close to Harlan Harold's place, and they became good friends. The native oysters had all been harvested out by the late 1800s. They planted eastern oysters. They tried those for a while, and they worked for a while, but what I always heard was it was the cold and the ice, and we had some particularly, if you look at the old photos in the 20s, the early part of the century, then they were just, it was just solid ice, like the pictures particularly in Nasale, if you look at the Finnish American Folk Festival photo exhibit, and it's just like you're looking at Alaska or Minnesota or something, that kind of heavy, heavy ice. Well, anyway, that did off the eastern oysters. So then there was some experiments going on through the University of Washington, up in Bellingham with the Japanese oysters and down on the Sound, and it seemed like the Japanese oyster might grow here. So there was more to tell, but that's another story another day by someone who can tell it better than I do. But anyway, I know it worked, and Dad came a-running. He went partners with Roy Kimmer and Glenn Heckus. They own the oyster cannery here, where the old building still stands out on the water, and Keystone Packing Company. Eventually, they broke up their partnership, and Dad kept the Northern Oyster Company. Dad came here in 1929, and he got acquainted first with the Heckuses. They had the Heckus Inn. This, again, is a greenhouse just down the road here on the bayside. It was highly rated by Duncan Hines, so they always had a lot of people there, and they served coffee all the time, and they had something to eat. I don't know why he liked to go there. It's not surprising that on December 7th, 1941, on a sunny Sunday morning, that Dad would walk down to the Heckuses for coffee and to listen to the news with Glenn. Remember, we didn't have any televisions then. So, and yes, the news came early that Japan had attacked Pearl Harbor. Both Glenn and Dad realized how it would change everything going into war. They knew that the country would not be manufacturing any more automobiles, building tanks and airplanes and ships. So just like that, Dad and Glenn got in a car and went up to Portland to buy new cars, one car for each of them. I don't know the make of Dad's car. Do any of you? No. I kind of think of Buick, but it lasted. Glenn got a Mercedes, he often did, and they lasted through the war. But a car, too, seemed it wasn't just for one family, our family, but it was shared. If you were going to the show or down to Oahu, you didn't go alone. You filled up the car with kids, and you all went to the theater. The Williams family ran the theater then, and eventually they had two theaters, one in Oahu and one in Long Beach. The Oahu Theater was about where the dry cleaners is now in Oahu on the way out to the docks. When we went to the movies after the war was over, they still showed newsreels of the war. That was a big thing. and men fighting. I especially remember the fighting on the island, showing pictures of the mayhem in the Philippines and in Japan. You can still see some of these newsreels on Turner Classic, especially those toward the end of the war. But after the war was over, we saw sweet films like Bambi Gone at the End and Lassie Come Home. That was a lot more fun. Sometimes we'd go out to the car after the before we were going to the show, and there would be kids already in the back seat ready to go down the show. So that was fun. Now as to the cannery, at the Northern Oyster Cannery, which was what Dad had named it, Dad hired a lot of different people. It just shocks me, you know, how you get surprised by your own parents, but he supplied a lot of jobs for people. Sometimes they worked full-time, and I'm not exactly sure of this, but they would have worked part of the year, and then they would have these few more days or weeks to fill in. Now, do you know what this is, Dixie? And then they could get their unemployment or their something, but if they didn't have those last few working days, they couldn't. So he would hire people like that, and then he hired people like Verna Aller, the lady who left all the money here for the peninsula, and she kept a record of the amount of oysters she did and the exact thing of the openers, you know, would stand in line, the oysters coming down and open, and she had a record of all of that, and that was very interesting. And then Peninsula residents like Dolores Alexander, Mrs. George Alexander, told how having a job just made the difference between her family eating or not. They had 12 children. And Dad sympathized because he had grown up poor too. He knew what it was like. His dad was a minister, and he was kind of progressive, and he didn't live in progressive towns and with progressive congregations. So no, it was hard for him to have a job. Dad would give people a job or a loan when they needed it most. He was poor himself and knew how bad it could get. At Christmas time at the cannery, the crew all had a party. Mom baked a turkey with trimmings, and others brought side foods too. They had a gift exchange, but Dad insisted they all write a poem. These are the cannery workers. You think I'd go over now? So they would give a gift and a poem, and you know, some were really very good, and some were really raunchy, and some were fun, but they had a good time with it and lots of laughing. I wish I had copies of them. The place rang with good cheer, and I'm sure if Dad was there, they had a sing-along sometime. He just always was, Catherine will tell you, he was always insisting we sing. Dad liked to take our guests out for, when we had guests at the house, he liked to take them out for a walk out to the oyster beds to pick oysters when the sand was hard enough then so you could walk on the bay. And he loved the bay, and he thought he'd show it to other people, and they were curious. He would go at low tide so he could pick up an oyster, and he'd open it for him, and then he'd just, you know, kick it back one swallow, that's all. And so then he'd immediately open an oyster for them, you know, they'd say how great, and then he'd expect them to do it too. He tricked a lot of people into doing it. But that kind of reminds me of initiation at Oahu High School, which was kind of bad then, and on the bus a lot of times, and the kids would get an oyster and they'd tie a string on it and they'd make you swallow it and then pull it back. Those high school buses are so safe. Dad was a PK, a preacher's kid, and so he always believed in going to church and always went to the Methodist church, and so did we all. At Dad's reception, that is the funeral, people kept coming up to me and telling me how he helped them. He might have been giving them a loan or a start for the store, for the Oysterville store, or housing, a job, or an old, and believe me, old car. But they were not to tell. Kind of reminded me of the millionaire. And so he would be so proud that not only his daughter and sons-in-law have continued oystering, but especially his grandchildren and even great-grandchildren are in the business, and that the old cannery, much refurbished, still stands in Oysterville. I think he would be shocked and pleased. My father and mother, Virginia Tarter, were both from Seattle and UW graduates. They married in 1935. Dad brought her to Oysterville, and they first lived in the Lehman place, which is out at the end of Skating Lake Road. Dad's cousins, the Morgans, also lived with them and must have been crowded. When the Wirt house came on the market, Dad snatched it up. It's where I live now. It's just kitty corner from the church, from Sidney and Niles, the Espy house. It's just one south. But it didn't look like that when they bought it. They had a little house. And we became a family of 5 children, John, Ruth, Ann, me, and Catherine. And my 2 sisters are here today, 1 brother-in-law, so that's pretty good. And if they want to raise their hands, they can. This is how you keep track of what somebody else is saying about you. Go to their talk. As I said, I was born and raised in Oysterville at the end of the war, the 4th child. Bigger families were more in style then, some a lot bigger, like 12, but our Aunt Esther, Dad's sister, a dentist, disapproved. She told Dad that 3 children were enough. My sainted mother answered, "Yes, but which ones would you choose?" Mom loved and put up with us, all of us, even in the later years. People would tell me that she reminded them of Archie Bunker's wife, Edith Bunker. I thought I was kind of insulted because my mom was awfully bright, way off the charts on the IQ, but she never flouted it or tried to show off, but she was kind and thought of others a lot, and she kept trying to tell me, "You have to think of the other guy." She never said, "Think of the other gal," it was the other guy. Her smile and sense of humor and laugh were infectious, and I know a lot of you knew her. Aunt Esther was widowed, young, and worked full-time. Her daughter, Mary Schofield Everly, stayed with us summers, helping out Mom. She loved riding horseback with the Heckuses and Kemper families, and Jane. What's Jane's last name?
Well, Starwall.
I mean,
Wilson Starwall.
Wilson, yeah. And she loved seeing what was a big treat to us, you'll remember, was when the Candy Boys came to town. Because they were brothers from Eastern Oregon, is that right? And oh boy, they were really snazzy. I could hardly wait to go to school. I followed my older siblings to the schoolhouse or the bus stop. Probably you remember that, Ruthie. I was always hanging around. I just thought it seemed such a wonderful, mysterious place. I had 3 teachers here at the Oysterville School, Mrs. Branch, which I love because she had a daughter my own age. Yay! There were 3 girls the same age in Oysterville. That was a big thing. and then we were still friends. And then I also had Mrs. Frances Reynolds Lillard, which I'll talk about more later, and in the end, Miss Daniels, who was a strict disciplinarian, which we probably needed by that time. Shorty and Muriel Wright lived up at the store where Greg is now, the Oysterville store and post office. It was good news for me because they had 7 children, and the youngest girl was my age and in my class. She was a humdinger, Kay. Muriel was a sunny woman with a lot of ambition. She would hook runs at the store in between customers and sort the mail for boxes. When things got slow for business, She was not idle, but always working on a project. She was a good seamstress. She made dresses for us girls who went to a Rainbow Girls, which is kind of a smaller order, you know, of Eastern Star, and she was involved in that. But we had some hazards around here that aren't, that we don't necessarily have now, because she'd drive at night, Mrs. Reynolds and Mrs. Wright, and we used to have a critter that was black and white and walked slowly across the road at night. So of course, when they came home from Rainbow Girls, one time we were all in our lovely formals, looked great, and yeah, there was, they couldn't see it ahead of time, and there was a skunk, and so the formals, they waited in the closet a long time. Phew, that was strong, poor skunk. Mrs. Reynolds was our teacher, and what she was most known for, and Kate, I think I forgot it, was the Oysterville Gazette. She had us read a paper that we printed, and it became our main focus, and I should have a website, because some of these things are just priceless. I remember we would solicit ads from the people in the community, and then put in, so that was how we raised money, and then we got enough money that we got to take a trip. So we went to the state capitol, and we saw Olympia, and you know, it was just a lot of fun, and it was you know, like teachers do now, where they put the class going for one goal together. Anyway, it was a lot of fun, but. I also had Miss Daniels, who was a tough teacher. She made us buckle down and behave, and as I said, that was probably a good thing. And she was a really a lot older teacher and couldn't walk very well, so we would always go to her trailer and pick up things and do things for her like that. By the time I graduated from Oysterville, there were no longer 8 grades there, but 6, and then that last year was 1957, there were only 6 kids in school, and my sister Catherine said there would only have been 3 the next year.
No, 5.
5, okay, and then, but sometimes we'd have other people drop by, like, they would stay for a week or a month or something like that. There'd be some, Edie Ann Olson would come down from Alaska with her folks, some Oklahoma cousins, and then there were some of Willard's daughters too, came out from New York. At school we played hide and go seek, Red Rover, we ran 3-legged races and sack races. Darlene Fraser Biggs was a champ at gymnastics, like cartwheels and backflips. Boys and girls competed singly in teams, racing, running, walking the fences, balancing all the way around the schoolyard. The boys were always building forts or building secret tunnels behind the school, and the girls were swinging or collecting pussy willows or counting daisies or running. We all loved running. We all wore pants then, and we didn't really have jeans, and it was a good thing we wore pants because, you know, we'd hang from the bars upside down. But when Oysterville School closed and when we went on, then, you know, that was not what you did. And I even, when I went to high school, it was still, you couldn't wear slacks then. In fact, if your skirt was too short, that is, in the middle of your knee, and your skirt couldn't touch the ground when you kneeled, you were sent home, which I was. Mother was not happy. What was the surprise was that we kids from Oysterville came out on top in academics when we went to Ocean Park, and so we were salutatorian and valedictorian and top of the class there. That's kind of funny for a small school, but that's what happened. Kay Wright and Richard Michaelis and I. And then we went 7th and 8th grade to Ocean Park and then on down to Ilwaco High School. We had a lot of fun. things, playing baseball, tag, riding horses, going everywhere on the beach, down the bay, and into the woods. My friend Kay Wright and I would go out riding alone and go on any logging road or trail we could explore. We went all over the bay shore and the ocean side and rode clear up to the point in the Patrick Place. Such freedom, and I don't remember our mothers ever saying, were you? What's going on? If it wasn't horseback riding, I was playing with stick horses, even leaf horses from camellia leaves, and that turned bright orange, the color of a bay horse. We'd go down to the bay alone and play for hours in the sand, making forts and building ranches, we said, out of sand to fence in our horses. We'd also go to the Golder Barn in the place where Terry and Mark now live, on the north end of town. We'd jump in the hay and climb upstairs and look for the snowy owl that sometimes lived there. It was, let's see, it was, there seemed to be kids and more kids in town. It was fun. Our mothers were generous and let them play. Our mother was generous and let them play at our place. All kinds of people from Oysterville have told me about that when they came, you know, and the Kimmis kids too. Mom was kind to people who rented the Red House, which was kitty corner from our house in South. It's now, and people call it the Red Cottage. It was where Willard Espy lived and wrote a lot of his book about Oysterville there. And now the Accardis from Portland owned it. The women I remember were Mom helping some of the people who lived there, like the Davis family. They had a lot of kids, and it was a hard time to get a job, and it was hard to feed those kids. And I remember going over there and playing with Patty was my age. And then the mother gave us a sandwich, and I thought that was so great because it was a ketchup sandwich, which is a piece of bread with ketchup. Or you could have a piece of bread with mayonnaise. And then I told that story to, and they made a horrible face, and they said they were really, really poor. They had nothing to put in the sandwich. Duh, you know, how do you know? I didn't. I should have figured it out, but I didn't. And, but anyway, she was very kind. Mom was very kind and really liked Rachel Davis was her name, just a very sweet person and hardworking. And you wonder how, now you hear all the stories about people poor and how it's hard to get out of it. And I can imagine there was much less of a welfare system, much less help in, and I can imagine it must have been tough. And then there was another family that came out from New York. I forget who they were friends with, but one of them, their name was Soper, and they were Italian, and also he was trying oystering out here, and of course I found out they do oysters in New York as well. But anyway, they also had a tough time making a go of it, and a lot of kids. And then on Easter morning, I remember her bringing this wonderful, it's just like you see in the magazines, this wonderful Easter loaf that was typical of Italians for Easter, and it's so beautiful. Just to thank Mom for her kindness. Let's see, I told you about Shorty. Well, maybe I didn't. Kay Wright's dad, Shorty, would drive the school bus, and a lot of people worried about him because he drove kind of fast, and he had another job with Union 76. And so then they're on what we call Green's Corner, where you could turn to Joe John's or go on the main road. The family there was the Greens, and they were an old family. And Lena loved animals, and they had a lot of chickens, but she couldn't possibly pen them up. So why did the chicken cross the road? Well, they like to go back and forth, I think. Anyway, that was always kind of the drama. Was he going to hit the chicken today? Let's see. About that. Let's see, a little more on the Heckes Hotel. And the Heckes family, Glenn and Helen Heckes, lived down the street, like I said, in this green house. Helen had not necessarily collected the old bottles, but it sort of started, she said, and then they just kept coming, and I'm surprised that the people still have the old bottles in the window. My dad always liked company, and he wanted to stay in touch, so he'd go down and visit Glenn and listen. And like I said, he heard about Pearl Harbor there. And then he and Glenn bought the cars, and then Helen needed a car to go to school, and so she and a lady called Mrs. Reynolds, one of my teachers, they got together. Mrs. Reynolds had a daughter who was in special ed, so they were good kids, and they rode together. And then they started thinking, well, why can't their kids get married? That is, Joanne and Peter Heckes. So they tried that, but guess what? Peter didn't have any interest, and neither did Joanne. It was all the mother's thing, and they all wanted it because there's a strip of land south of the Heckes house that went all the way to the bay, and then they thought the kids could live there, and that would all work out. That's where Cindy Hayward lives now. Peter did inherit the land, but anyway, let's see. I think the old Ford that the Reynolds had was probably in 1948, and I helped her paint it green with Rust-Oleum. And so, one door you could open and get in, and the other door you could push out and get out. But anyway, that was one of the best cars. And then when they wanted to go, if Helen and Mrs. Reynolds were going someplace, they would like to take the Mercedes, because Glenn always had a Mercedes, but the trouble was that he always had it apart and he was working on it. So they would go in the Ford instead. So much for that. As for the church, when I was a kid, the Oysterville church was closed up, except for weddings and funerals, and that was rare wedding, but there were quite a few funerals. And the funerals were a big deal because the people were coming to celebrate a life of a person, and sorrowing too. Of course, us kids couldn't go, so we'd climb up into the apple trees and try to peek in and see what was going on and what they were doing. For some obscure reason, probably copying the adults, I began funeral services at home. So I buried a lot of bird carcasses. And Catherine...
Turtle.
Yeah, I had a turtle. And then what was it I sang?
You conducted the funeral, and then you got out about as many chairs as were here, and then she sat and played Chopin's March for the Dead. It was in the piano. Da, 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 da. And then after she played that, she got up and said, "We're all gathered here to mourn Tora the turtle," and it was just Marcy Branch and me.
Can't tell about imagination. I know it's getting on to time, but I wanted to talk about the women in Oysterville were just amazing, and I started a whole separate thing on them. But you know, they a lot of them worked out of the home. Like at the cannery or at the store or someplace else, and others made their home a business. So they were really resourceful and hardworking, and made it stick together somehow. And they also, the other thing I wanted to talk about the women doing, and I started a profile of each one, but you know, that's in some other notes and another time. But that's it. But they also did a lot of gardening, the women did. On the south end of town, one gal, Lou Mitchell, was a little bit unusual, shall we say. She told my father she was Klondike Kate. So we, not too politely, called her Klondike Kate. and she had red lamps and lights, and she took care of old men for quite a while at her house, healing, and so it was, you know, we just made up all kinds of stories, and maybe some were true and some not, but she was probably making up stories too if she was calling that a cave. Anyway, she grew gladiolas and she sold them, and they were beautiful, and she'd come to the door and want to sell, want Mom to buy, and we would. And then next was Irene Nelson, who lives where Bradley Hewson is making a garden. Irene Nelson was, I don't know, all or part Indian, but she was, and Chinook, and that wasn't so popular then, but she helped her husband, and they I believe, had the first cannery to make smoked oysters. It was a big hit. And she also loved flowers. She had scilla, blue scilla all along the side. She had daffodils. She had peonies. There were pear and apple trees in her yard. She really had a touch for gardening. And I remember when her husband died and she came over, you know, it's so shocking when you're a child to first hear that someone has, you know, she came over and she usually didn't come visiting, and she said, Mom, Tommy's dead, you know, and so then you know, then you go, and I don't know if people still do that. Then I think I'd probably call the EMTs instead of calling my neighbor, but that's the way it was then. Mom had a gardener that I didn't understand at all. He was very tall and large. He was good at planting trees. He was good at planting solid things. His name was Mr. Clem. And we children found him scary because he would sort of chatter, and we could hardly understand him, and he'd make a lot of grunts. But later, Marguerite Carolyn, your mother-in-law, told me that he had been in Germany during World War I, and they changed him to the big guns.
Oh.
And so then he couldn't get away, and then he never could talk normal afterwards. But anyway, he was one heck of a gardener, and there were a lot of nice things in the yard because of that. My brother John and my dad had a running argument about trees. And if you wonder about the trees on our place, they're cedar, they're redwood, they're Doug fir, they're spruce, they're apple trees, they're holly trees. Johnny loved trees. and is it what's the name of that flowering one? Is it Laurestine?
Oh, the viburnum tinus? Yeah. Laurustinus, yeah.
Yeah, it's turned into a tree too, and I think when I walk down the lane, it's kind of shady now, but I think boy Johnny would be happy, and boy Dad would be getting out the chainsaw. Let's see, I think the women's club was here at the school, and that's what they had instead of Oysterville Community Club, was the women's club, and there are notes on that, and it's an interesting thing. They planted, one of their projects was planting daffodils along the road, and I thought that was so beautiful, you know, to just go. Of course, sometimes we pick them, but now there are some left now, but a lot of times people, I don't know, some people don't like it and they mow it down, you know, before the blossom has died out, which means, of course, it's not going to come back next year. But anyway, that was one of their big projects. So was giving meat and packages of food to people at Thanksgiving and Christmas time, like Bill Lahakis, who lived almost under the hill opposite Oysterville store, an old World War I veteran. He was terrified that it wasn't Germany, it was east of Germany, where he had come off a shipwreck, and he just didn't want to be caught again. I'm sure he didn't volunteer to be on that ship, and he was very scared of anything police or anything, and I don't think that was unusual. I think there were probably a lot of people here. The Oysterville Club, they shared plants, they made gardens, and everybody ate fresh peas and beans. Mom had camellias, a flowering hedge, summer lilac, roses, spring bulbs, yew trees. Dad's family was terribly English, you know, it's a couple generations back. And so then his father insisted he have yew trees, and they're kind of unusual and pretty there. And I don't know what the blue sticky flower is that Bradley has and I have, but it's an unusual, what's blue sticky? I know you're thinking. Can't you think of this? Yeah, I described it so clearly. Anyway, it's still going. And then holly trees, and they're English. Daisies, everybody seemed to have daisies in the lawn, or Shasta daisies, or, and then we had fuchsias that were always primroses. We looked for the violas coming up early, that meant here comes spring, and purple roses by the fence, yellow forsythia, honeysuckle, later came rhododendrons, I think, scilla, tulips, and there was a rare plant at Helen Heckes's. Do you guys know what that plant is at the greenhouse? It's you guys would, I don't know, I cannot remember the name of it, I've been told. The women of Oysterville did housework and cooked meals and shopped, and many also worked outside the home. Others ran a business from home, used a skill like babysitting or house cleaning or hair cutting and styling. My mother was too busy, but the others did it. But one job my mother did was to serve on the election board. Coincidentally, my sister Ruth and I both worked on election board, she in Ocean Park and me in Naysell, when I married and lived there. This is when we were still going to our own precinct and voting by ballot. I think there were 3 women. Is that right, Ruthie? I think, yeah, here we had 3 women, and probably more in Ocean Park. And it meant good for Mom. It was unusual. She'd get up early at 6 a.m. She'd pack her lunch and left us dinner to heat up, or if Dad was in charge, we had boiled hot dogs, which was a great treat. Then off my mother would go to the school, walking in the dark with a flashlight, arriving before 7 a.m., and she and the other trustees had a table about back in that corner, and they would carry in their lunch, and I think probably brought their thermos at first. They didn't have a coffee pot here then. And then they'd run up the flag. It would be a long, and ring the bell. Come on, 7 o'clock, polls are open. It'd be a long day. The signs were up and out, and some gals brought their knitting and crocheting, but sometimes they didn't even have time for it. It's a day of greeting neighbors. It was fun, but you couldn't stand in here too long. We're outside, so if it was nice weather, you'd visit. If not nice weather, the greetings were short. In earlier days, the people took the day off and had coffee and cake with families, and they had something they called the Federalist cake, or Independence cake, or Election Day cake. Do any of you have a recipe for that? You heard of that? It was, in Naysell particularly, they would dress it, a lot of them came from Finland, or their parents did, so they really respected being able to vote. So they would dress up in suits. Did you hear this, Terry, too? Yeah, they'd dress up in suits, and the men and the women, and kind of take a day off, and, and then go and vote, and then celebrate together with a nice coffee hour, which in Naysell means feast. The voting process itself was simple enough. One of the clerks asked your name, checked it on the roll of voters, had you sign in, and gave you a ballot. I don't know if anybody had to show ID. I don't know. Or if they just knew each other. Around the middle of the day, someone from the county would come on over, or perhaps 2 people to check to see how the polls were going. They might have taken some ballots with them. But they were checking at the halfway point. Through it all, it was still a time to greet the neighbors, and they exchanged cookie recipes too. When it came time to close the polls at 8 p.m., it was time to count the ballot. as usual, unless it was a presidential election, there were not too many issues to deal with. The candidates, the people running for local counties and state would often come by our house before the election to see and talk to you about the issues. I don't think we were so unusual. I think they probably stopped your house and your house in lots of places. Do any of you remember that? No? Well, they wanted to catch up on the news of this area and from the locals, and the locals wanted to hear what was going on in Olympia or Washington, D.C. I don't know if this happened everywhere, but it was fun and exciting to have a stranger come and welcome them in and listen to them talking about things I didn't understand. The counting of the ballots came after the 8 p.m. closing, then the election board gals emptied out the ballots and one by one read them and checked them off, and one of them wrote them. My mother was very good at math, and so she just had a knack for it. And so I remember when they just had to count and count and count again, and I think it made it easier because she was good at it. They had to tally votes for the president, for the state and county offices, and for the initiative. One time, one of the election ladies was getting old and forgetful, and that made counting hard, and they had to stay and count until past midnight, even if they had no troubles. It was a big job. My mother usually came home by 10:30, but unless something unusual like that happened. Dad wasn't used to being alone with the kids, so boy, was he glad to see her. He was a leader in the town and the school and the church, but he depended on Mom's steadiness and support to make his way. Long before they married, Dad had boarded at the Kemmers and eaten with the Heckes family. When he and Mom married, they came to the peninsula and needed a place to live, and Dad heard that Mr. Word had died, and so they bought up the place where I live now, the home family place. Let's see, I think the rest is just about the kids that have come to our place, to our own house, and all the fun it was when we had an open house, and kids running up and down the stairways and sliding on the banisters and just welcoming them. And then it was a big enough room upstairs for ping pong or square dancing, and we did both. There are a lot of memories, and I just really hope that Oysterville too, as pretty as it is and as peaceful as it seems to all of us, can come to treasure the spirit of community and helpfulness that a lot of us grew up in. So thank you very much.
I can't let you go just yet. This book has some amazing things in it. And if I can find, the first half is basically on the Finnish people that came and stories of their coming and settling in Maycell. Here's this one's called Lower River Boys. Damn, I love whiskey. And if I'm not in a fight by Saturday night, I'm drunk. Some say we died with our boots on. Noah, that was John, fell over the side, his boots stuck in the net, but we hauled him out, boots and all. There were 15 or 20 of us down there on the lower river, depression times, and nothing to do but gill net full time for dog salmon, all of us chums looking for chum. We lived in a shack or a houseboat. Once Gus beached his houseboat, got looped, and neighbors woke him up with water up to his neck. Fishing in the dark, we'd look out over the river. The boats had them Swede stoves going for coffee or soup, something to keep a guy warm till our nets were full. And my favorite, Oysterville, my love. Gray, cloudy skies, drip rain. Yet another overcast sou'wester, beating rain down so hard, there's reason to ask why we are here to celebrate on this wind-swept peninsula, only a mile away from the peninsula. Soil too sandy to grow good hay, a moist place damp with rheumatism and mold and poisonous mushrooms, and quarrelsome people who do not love where they live quite enough. Yet, the people come, lots sell, houses move off the market, more and more couples walk through church and schoolyard wanting to be married, to own a summer place someday in this romantic spot. It must be the memories they hear. It was a patchwork of streets, black asphalt by the bay, leading past swamps where young boys chased tadpoles into glass jars, among horsetails along rusty ditches. The children walk with long boots pulled up, wading through water to the school, just one room, and just around the corner. When the bell rang, it was time to line up outside by height, of course, to walk into a house with blackboards and alphabets ringing the room. It was time to read all the books we could and learn to sing East Side, West Side, the sidewalks of New York for our town song, and to put together a paper, the Oysterville Gazette. At recess, we caught snakes in a corner by the swing. Red Rover, send Jimmy right over still rings out if you listen, with Ollie Ollie Oxenfree echoing too. By the play shed, children once hung by their knees and balanced across beams from one side of the bars to another. In winter, snow came so seldom, it blew through the cracks, sifted into bedrooms, and we, like puppies let loose from some lockup, fell out to fall into snow angels, to fight with snowballs filled with pine cones, to make snow candy and watch the blue chipped ice piled up by the bay. Down the path from the school, there is still a swamp where we slid on ice. It was easy enough to call it skating. This long run at it with cleats skidding across the crackling ice, hanging onto willow trees for balance. Evenings. Were there ever such evenings when everyone would head out to Skating Lake? I mean, people came from as far away as Ocean Park. They would come with a bonfire, and there may have been stars, like Art Matthews and Bob Beachy, with skates they actually laced up, stand up and skate off, like some phantom figures from our dreams. We would inch out after them, crackling over the bubbling ice into the dark by the trees, sliding, daring, till Butchie fell in. Then we'd come clomping on frozen feet back to the comforting shore. And now, even now, yet, people come, lots sell, houses move off the market, more and more couples walk through church and schoolyard, wanting to be married, to own a summer place someday in this romantic spot. It must be the memories they feel. It must be the memories they feel.